Preparing to live stream.
So there's something.
I just got a notice here saying that it's being live streamed, if that's any help.
Okay, are we on?
Yep, we're on.
Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. We've had a few technical issues.
I just got a
Imagine that.
notice here saying that it's being live streamed, if that's any help.
Imagine that, technical issues in this day and age. Well, welcome everyone. We've had a few technical issues. I'm hearing this coming back at me
You got latent feedback there.
in this day and age. Welcome everyone. Testing 1, 2. I think we may be all right now. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Traditions Week 1 at Common Ground on the Hill from the Maryland Folklife Center here in Westminster, Maryland, on the campus of McDaniel College. We're coming to you virtually, and some of you are with us in real time. Others of you have accessed this keynote on our YouTube channel at any time. So welcome to you, and we're very excited about our 3-week run that's beginning today. Every week we have a keynote address, which we hope will resonate through our community of students and viewers throughout our week and maybe on further throughout the year. Keynotes are a way of setting a tone and creating interest, and that tone and interest we hope will make its way into the various classrooms where we can have conversations. Tonight's presenter is Peter Michael. And let me tell you a little bit about Peter. He's an award-winning author. He grew up overseas and has lived on 5 continents. I haven't visited 5 continents. He grew up on 5 continents in a career of writing, international advisory roles, and teaching. Peter has written 8 books, 3 of which have won national book prizes. And he has appeared on, ready for this, C-SPAN, National Public Radio, ABC News, America Untold, Home and Garden TV, High Noon Entertainment, and in numerous publications. His first literary prize, I found this very interesting, came as an undergraduate for an article on British polymath James Clerk Maxwell and Maxwell's equations, which a century ahead of their time explained electromagnetism and light. I can hardly read that, much less understand it. So early on, Peter was a prodigy. In his early career, he authored a population plan adopted by the government of South Korea, and while working at the United Nations as a groundbreaking method allowing national family planning programs worldwide to lower population growth rates faster. He is founder and publisher, and this is what brings him to our dais today, of the Underground Railroad Free Press, which is North America's leading Underground Railroad news publication, which awards the annual Free Press prizes and serves as the central registry of contemporary Underground Railroad organizations and programs. I find this interesting as well. He descends from John Hanson, the first United States president under the Articles of Confederation from 1781 to 82. A lot of people think George Washington was our first president. No, it was John Hanson. Maryland colonial governor William Stone and Franz Ludwig Michael in 1704, the first European explorer of Western Maryland, where Peter Michael now lives. As I said, tonight's program, Keynote, is about the Underground Railroad. And you might be thinking, well, why that? Why now are we talking about the Underground Railroad? Because it's present. There are many, many Underground Railroads happening this very day, and a lot of the people that involved in them have been at Common Ground on the Hill. Merely a generation ago, a wellspring of information about the Underground Railroad began to emerge through the oral tradition, giving us an increasingly clear picture of this critical time in our national history. Lest we forget history, Peter will engage us tonight in considering the relevance of the Underground Railroad in today's world. So from Cooling Springs in the area of Daubs, Maryland, just south of Frederick, right near the Potomac River, make welcome Peter Michael.
Thank you, Walt. Thank you very much. Walt forgot to mention that he and I are cousins, full disclosure. We basically grew up together, not in the same household, but we're only a few years apart. So he's much younger than I am. And we've known each other virtually our whole lives. Before I get started here with our slideshow and presentation, I want to mention a few things about Walt. I haven't told him I was going to do this, but here it comes anyway. 28 years ago, he had the idea of promoting racial harmony through what he knows best, which is traditional music and the traditional arts. And he started something called Common Ground on the Hill. And when McDaniel College asked him how long he thought he would do this, he said, oh, maybe 10 or 12 years. Well, he's in year 28 now. And a few years ago, Common Ground went from 2 weeks to 3 weeks. It just blasted right on through the COVID hiatus. And here we are again today. Walt is an exemplar, in my estimation, of what it means to be a good citizen and living a life of helping others. Walt also descends from a family that has an unbroken chain of Methodist ministers, mainly Methodist, going back over 200 years. And Walt is the son and the grandson and the great-grandson and the cousin twice of Methodist ministers. And I told him once himself, I said, Walt, you're really a minister. He said, no, I grew up as a preacher's kid, PK. I decided not to do that. Well, he might not ever have ordained, but he's been ministering all his life, as anyone who's been to Common Ground for a while knows. So we owe him a lot for this gem of an idea of creating Common Ground. And so when you see him around the campus over the next 3 weeks, just stop him and thank him for all that he's done, because he deserves it. Okay, I'm going to share my screen with you all. And pull up tonight's program. And what you should see is the first slide with some moving mountains here, Common Ground on the Hill. Are we okay there, Phil, tech-wise? Okay, very good. This was a secret operation the entire time. For its entire 280-year existence, it was illegal. It was not only illegal if you were a freedom seeker on the run, it was illegal if you helped any freedom seekers on the run. So information on the Underground Railroad is hard to find, it's hard to research. We don't know how many freedom seekers there were, but the best estimates would fall in this range between 50 and 200,000. What we know today of the Underground Railroad is almost entirely passed down through families such as mine, through property owners, and from old newspapers and accounts. And that makes it very, very valuable, these stories, many of which, of course, have died out as people have died out. The other 95% of claimed Underground Railroad sites, that is, escape routes and safe houses. We have confirmed proof of, and they're almost entirely in the northern states. So it's important. The importance of oral tradition is very, very important in the Underground Railroad. It was a mysterious operation then. Again, if you were involved with it, you didn't tell anybody unless there was somebody you knew very, very well and could trust. Even in families, one brother might not tell the other brother, and so forth. It was illegal, as I mentioned, for its entire existence. It had to be clandestine, and it was dangerous, especially for the freedom seekers themselves, but also for the safe house operators and the so-called conductors. Therefore, it was almost entirely unrecorded, even after the Civil War, when Black people became free. If you had been involved in the Underground Railroad, particularly if you were in a southern state or a border state, you didn't run around bragging about it because half your neighbors were opposed to it. So that was another way that a lot of the stories and information about the Underground Railroad died. Speaking from experience, it is difficult to research. The Underground Railroad would have begun as early as 1585. Now, that's the year that the first recorded shipment of enslaved Africans reached North America at the Spanish colony of St. Augustine, Florida. And the first time that any enslaved person there escaped and was aided by anybody else, probably a Seminole Indian, that would have begun the beginning of the Underground Railroad, even though it wouldn't have a name for centuries. The Quakers were the first denomination in the future United States, in the English colonies, to ban slavery. The Mennonites followed shortly thereafter. And later in the 1700s, more Protestant denominations, but not the Catholic Church, oddly enough, began abolishing slavery until most or all of them did. Also in the late 1700s, people who were helping freedom seekers began to find each other out slowly, but that began to build. And slowly the network that we call the Underground Railroad today began, in which one safe house operator knew where to send people visiting him, freedom seekers, knew where to take them or send them on to safety at another safe house. And that became more and more organized. In 1808, the US abolished the importation of slaves, though some were brought in surreptitiously. In 1816, the African Methodist Episcopal Church was founded by two African-American ministers in Philadelphia. In 1842, I researched this myself, the first known use of the term Underground Railroad occurred in the St. Louis newspaper reporting the escape of a freedom seeker. In 1850, the Second Fugitive Slave Act passed. The first one was in 1793, in the Washington administration. The Second Fugitive Slave Act was a lot more draconian because what it required to do was required all United States citizens to assist in the capture of freedom seekers, no matter how they felt, like it or not. And that created a real revolt in the northern states and actually in parts of the South as well. In 1857, we had the United States Supreme Court decision galvanizing the North. That was the all-time worst decision that the Supreme Court ever made until this week. The decision said that blacks, quote, blacks had no rights which whites were bound to respect, classified black people as non-citizens. And this basically enraged the North and galvanized it was the proximate cause of the Civil War. And then finally, there were some other steps, but when the Civil War ended, that ended the need of the Underground Railroad, though there were many Black people who fled from south to north, now free, and they used the same safe houses that they would have used before. This is an excellent pictorial representation of the Underground Railroad. This is Charles Weber's painting that hangs in the Cincinnati Art Museum. And here we see a family, a Black family, arriving, having been sent up from presumably some other safe house to this safe house for safekeeping. And it's in the middle of winter, marvelous painting. Let's take a trip on the Underground Railroad. First of two trips that we'll take today. Here we'll see 4 paintings by the Florida artist Janice Huse, H-U-S-E, if you want to look her up. And here's the escape from the big house. You can see my pointer on the screen. There's the big house there where the white people lived. This is at sunset. Why sunset? Because travel was safer at night than during the day on the Underground Railroad. And this family is fleeing just before dark. And here they are at one of the stops on the way headed north. They're being hidden in what looks like a barn under a trap door. This is a Quaker family aiding them. How can we tell that this is Quaker? This lady has the Quaker bonnet on. Next, after some more travel, the party, the same group, is being handed off from one so-called conductor, this lady, to this conductor who will take them on yet further. And the woman conductor here is not just any conductor. She is Harriet Tubman, the famous Harriet Tubman, who we'll speak more about later. And then finally, I like to think that that's the Potomac River in the background and Virginia on the other side. And this is Maryland. However, until 1864, if you got to Maryland, you were in Northern Territory, but Maryland was still a slave state. You weren't in a free state until you crossed the Mason-Dixon line into Pennsylvania. Most of the travel on the Underground Railroad occurred on either side of the Appalachian Range. There was a heavy flow of freedom seekers from Kentucky and a bit from further south, though that was a longer escape, through Ohio up to Lake Erie here, and then off into Canada, though sometimes they stopped in Ohio and made their home. The furthest west known Underground Railroad site was in Lincoln, Nebraska. But the main flow is here, right where we are, on the eastern side of the Appalachian Mountains to Pennsylvania, New York, and New England. And a good part of what we'll look at today occurs in this blue circle, and that's where Westminster and Common Ground are. This is Frederick County, Maryland. This is one county to the west of Carroll County, where Westminster is. And this is an 1858 map that I've annotated here with known Underground Railroad routes and safe houses, known safe houses and possible safe houses. If it's in red, it's verified. If it's in blue, it's a maybe but probable. This route here, down here at the bottom one is the Potomac River. If you were a freedom seeker from the south, you had to cross the Potomac River. If you were on this side of the Appalachians, you had to cross the Ohio River if you were on the other side. This other red route on the northern side of the river is the Baltimore and Ohio Canal tow path. The canal operated until 1924. It got into operation in the 1840s. And the barges were towed up and down the canal by mules who walked along the towpath. The towpath still exists. This whole thing is a 185-mile-long park from Washington, D.C. to Cumberland, Maryland. Beautiful park, beautiful place to walk. And it is known, there are known accounts of freedom seekers using the towpath as an escape route heading north, which is to the west. This line here from present-day Harper's Ferry through the county seat of Frederick and on up here, Maryland Route 194, and then Pennsylvania Route 194 is the old Aboriginal Susquehanna Path, which is known to have been used. This route here is the B&O Railroad line from Point of Rocks, this point here, to Baltimore off the map. That is a known route which will travel here in a minute with an escape party. And this route is a route that was described in his autobiography by a freedom seeker whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, who said he went up alongside Catoctin Mountain, and this is Catoctin Mountain. This cluster here is at the county seat. Not surprising that you would have a cluster of safe houses in the most populous place. And then we have safe houses, concentrated many in the southern part of the county, a few off the map here in the next county over, one up here in Pennsylvania. And we'll move on. This is one of the most famous escape accounts in all of the recorded accounts of escapes. On Christmas Eve of 1855, Christmas Eve for a reason, Frank Wanzer, his fiancee, Emily Foster, and Grigsby couple, Barnaby and Mary Elizabeth, fled their plantations near Aldie, Virginia. Why Christmas Eve? That was when white people were relaxing a bit, particularly on Christmas Day, weren't watching as closely, and it was a good time for an escape. Here's a map, and we're going to see the route that the Wanzer party took. Now here is Aldie, down here, near this intersection, and put your eye where the pointer is and watch. They travel up through Leesburg, across Edwards Ferry and the Potomac River, following the rail line to Hood's Mill, Maryland. Now a bit about this before we move on. At Edwards Ferry, there were 11 ferries in Frederick County, by the way, that I've been able to identify. Edwards Ferry was operated by 3 generations of the same Black family for a very long time. And it is known that that family carried freedom seekers across the Potomac River. Now the Black family did not own Edwards Ferry, a white family did, and it hired this family, the Elsie family, to operate the ferry. The Wanzer's account, which he told later and which was recorded, and which we'll get to, said that he then took the wagon that they had taken up along the railroad. And there was only one railroad route in the county at that time, and that is the nation's very first rail line from Baltimore to Point of Rocks. Point of Rocks is here, went right by our farm, and they went up along the rail line, left it here at Mount Airy, got to a place called Hood's Mill on the South Patapsco River, and this is today's route, Maryland 97, which runs to Westminster. What happened at Hood's Mill was this. They were accosted by slave catchers who they were able to drive off. The party, the escape party, had guns and dirks, as the telling goes, knives, and they were able to drive off these people temporarily, they unhooked their horses from the wagon, this wagon that they had taken, and they rode double bareback. This is Christmas Day now. We don't know where they spent Christmas Eve, but it was somewhere probably near the farm where I am, would have been in that vicinity. And they took off on Christmas Day and headed north. They spent Christmas night somewhere, we're not sure where. Watch the line again. Off they go through Westminster, into Pennsylvania, to Columbia, Pennsylvania. And there they met William Whipper, who became one of the most famous Underground Railroad station operators and conductors ever. Whipper was a wealthy Black dealer in lumber and coal, and he owned 23 rail cars, which he used to transport his lumber and coal, mainly to Philadelphia, which was his main market. And one of those rail cars had a false end in the back where you could put people, and nosy others who were searching probably couldn't tell the difference. So the party reached Columbia on the 26th of December, and Whipper hid them until New Year's Day, when again, white people were taking the day off and celebrating, and then he put them in one of his rail cars, and off they went to Philadelphia, where they met William Still, who was a main customer of William Whipper. William Still, among other things, was a retailer rather, of coal and lumber in Philadelphia. Sometime in the 1840s or 50s, William Still began sheltering freedom seekers. And in addition, he did a wonderful thing. He started interviewing these freedom seekers and writing down their stories, their accounts. And he collected over 190 accounts involving more than 900 people by the end of the Civil War, when there was no more Underground Railroad. And in 1872, he had these accounts written up and put into a book called The Underground Railroad. It's been reprinted many times. You can get a copy if you like at a reasonable price on Amazon. And his book accounts for a high proportion of all of the known recorded escape accounts. So we owe a great debt of gratitude for William Still. He never got caught. What he would do is write down these accounts, and then at night he would go to a nearby cemetery, and there was a stone that he could remove in the back of one of the large monuments there, and that's where he hid his accounts until 1872, when he had them printed up. He put the two couples on a train, the real one, not the Underground Railroad, but an actual railroad that went through Albany and stopped in Syracuse, New York, where they were sheltered by the Reverend Logan, Joseph Logan, I believe is his name, who was a minister. And so the couple who had been engaged up to that point, Wanzer and his fiance, got married, and they went on to Toronto, Canada, made it safely by January the 28th. We know that because a group of white people up there who were put in charge of meeting freedom seekers wrote a letter back to, one lady wrote a letter back to William Still saying, "Your cargo has arrived safely." And the two couples lived in the same home all of their lives. They lived in peace and freedom, of course, for the rest of their lives. Mr. Grigsby was a cab driver, being a cab in those days being horse and livery. In August of that year, Frank Wanzer did a remarkable thing. He couldn't stand the thought of his sister remaining in Virginia and risking being sold south, which was the rumor. So he walked back to Virginia from Canada. He hid out in the woods for 2 weeks, living off the land, biding his time until the right moment came, grabbed his sister, his brother-in-law, and his close friend Vincent Smith and Robert Stewart, and took them all the way through Still's safe house, where he told their story, and then to Canada. Of the four, Wanzer was last to die in August of 1911, as here. Now, Frank Wanzer and Elizabeth had a number of children, none of whom lived to adulthood. However, when Frank Wanzer fled from Virginia, he was a recent widower. He fled on Christmas Eve. His wife had died the previous August, and he had two young children, two girls, aged 1 and 2. He could not take them on his flight with him. So he left with them with their grandmother, Harriet Johnson, who raised the two girls. When they reached adulthood, I'm not sure how old they were, they wanted to meet their father. And so they went to Canada and began to live with him. Those children, those girls, had their own children, and that kept the Wanzer name alive. One of the daughters had 20 children, you can imagine, which accounts for the large family reunions, which the Wanzer family still has. On the left here is my friend, Alan Nelson of the District of Columbia, who is the great-great-grandson of Frank Wanzer and Harriet Johnson. And this is his wife, Janua, in the middle, me on the right here. Alan's is also he's a retired mechanical engineering professor from the University of District of Columbia. He's also a sculptor of large abstract metal sculptures, a number of which have been commissioned by the Washington, D.C. government, which stand here and there around the nation's capital. His sculptor's name is Uziki, which is what I call him. Uziki and I have become close friends. Now, if you look at Uziki's shirt, I have that shirt. I should have worn it tonight. He had that shirt made up with the drawing which William Still had commissioned for his book on the front. And Uziki and Janua have been up to our farm to visit a number of times. I went to a great Christmas party down there. Uziki is also an artist, as is Janua. And when you go into their home, it's hard to see the walls for all the art on the walls. The place is just chock full of art. Let me introduce you to some people you might already know, the major figures of the Underground Railroad. None is more famous than Harriet Tubman. I'll just let you read this slide. One nice story about her, maybe my favorite, is that during the Civil War, she was requested by Lincoln personally to join the Army as a nurse, which she did. And she was sent to a fort on the coast of South Carolina, which the Union forces had captured. And she requested of the colonel, the Union colonel in charge of that fort, that she be put in charge of a unit of Union soldiers to go upriver, the Combahee River, and free slaves. And in under a week, she led this unit, the first American woman to ever lead a unit into battle, and freed 756 people in under a week. Quite remarkable. Here she is in very old age. What she decided to do after the Civil War, she lectured a lot, and that's how she made her living. She also received a pension, a small pension, and she, with some help, created a home for old folks. I call it an old folks home today. Oh, there's a modern term for it, nursing home, I guess you'd say. And she ended up in that home herself when she became old and a bit feeble. She died at the age of, we're not sure, 93, we think, in 1913 on March the 10th. We don't know her birthday, so in many states it's March the 10th that is celebrated as Harriet Tubman Day, as it is in Maryland, a true American icon. This is Thomas Garrett, a Quaker blacksmith who lived in Wilmington, Delaware, who over a period of 30 years sheltered, by his count, more than 2,800 freedom seekers. In 1848, he was caught red-handed, aiding freedom seekers. They were captured. He was arrested, tried, found guilty, and fined $5,400, which was more than his net worth. And to pay the fine, the court took his home, furnishings, blacksmithing tools, left him destitute, literally homeless on the street. Within a week, the townspeople of Wilmington had contributed enough building materials so that he could rebuild another home. And a competitor blacksmith of his said, here, you can use half my tools to stay in business. He is a revered person, was all the rest of his life. He died in 1871, the first major figure of the Underground Railroad to pass on. This is William Seward, governor of New York, candidate for president in 1860, lost to Lincoln. Lincoln hired him as his Secretary of State. You might have heard Seward's name mentioned as in the term of Seward's folly. It was Seward who negotiated the purchase of Alaska for 3 cents an acre, hardly a folly. He was from Auburn, New York, where Harriet Tubman settled. They knew each other. He used his home as a safe house openly and dared slave catchers, Southerners, to do anything about it, but none ever dared do it. And toward the end of her life, he helped her get her home for the elderly started. Quite a figure. Well, what was it? What exactly was the Underground Railroad? We've gotten a pretty good idea tonight, I think, of how it operated and who might have been on it. It has a number of other distinctions. It was the first mass civil disobedience since the Revolutionary War. We've seen civil disobedience, successful civil disobedience in the 1960s. I think we're about to see a good bit more of it. This was the first of it since the Revolutionary War. With the Underground Railroad and how it operated, and hand in hand with the abolitionist movement, a new view of America was born. And that view was that all people were created equal, and everyone deserved to be free. It was also the first mass joint effort between blacks and whites. And it was a national concept test over the soul of America. Now, I've used that term in the title of my talk tonight. I borrowed it from my friend Fergus Bordewick, whose book I'll introduce you to in a minute has this as its subtitle. And Fergus hit the nail on the head. This was the contest, the battle for the soul of this country. Finally, the success of the Underground Railroad led to the Civil War, which the good side won. And the instant that the war was over, it was no longer necessary, and on the spot, it passed into history. However, it still exists worldwide. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of examples of the Underground Railroad today. Probably the one that's getting the most notice is the Underground Railroad from North Korea, if you look here at my cursor, North Korea here to South Korea. All that's between them is an armed, impenetrable border. So what route do you take if you have a border that can't be crossed? Let's look. Down through China, through Southeast Asia, catch a plane at Bangkok, and land at Seoul, the capital of South Korea. That is certainly called the long way around. That is a very active underground railroad route, and it's in action today. I had the pleasure of writing about it a few years ago. There's another one from Saudi Arabia to the Philippines. There are Filipino workers who are attracted to glossy ads for work in Saudi Arabia. They get there, they have a job all right. They may or may not get paid. They can't leave. They find their way out and they go back home. Over here in the desert country of Mauritania is a very active underground railroad route through Morocco to the Mediterranean coast, where it ends, or many of those fleeing go on to Europe. And believe it or not, watch the United States. Whoops, I got ahead of myself. Here in India, there's no way out of India because all the countries around it also, slavery is legal. Or if not illegal, there's a lot of it. There's no point escaping there. Pakistan, Bangladesh. But there's a very active movement to free the millions of slaves in India. India has more slaves than any other country. We'll see the figure in a minute. China is second. This X in China means there's no way out. There's no escape route, and those people are stuck. Now, we'll look at the United States. This gets a bit political here, audience. With the Supreme Court's decision basically outlawing abortion or leaving it up to the states, about half the states, most of which are located in the middle of the country, will have no more abortion. So what's going to happen, in fact, I understand it's already happening, is that there are groups that have set up and individuals who will go into those states to women who need to terminate a pregnancy and drive them to a state where it's legal and then drive them back. But in some of these states that have outlawed abortion, that too is illegal. If you help somebody get an abortion, that is considered a felony, believe it or not. Didn't used to be that way until this week. And the other half of the states, 24, almost half, are located on the East Coast, from Virginia on up, all along the West Coast and Illinois. So we have an illegal underground railroad to assist women, particularly poor women, again, reborn in the United States this week. That's the truth. So who are the enslaved today? This little Indian boy is one. He is a bricklayer. And how old does this little guy look? 5, 6, 7. Look at the panel which came up on the left. Worldwide, the estimate is that there are 46 million enslaved people. Now that's a fraction of 1% of the 7 billion people on the planet today, but 46 million is 46 million too many. The highest percentage is in North Korea, where nearly 11% of its population are enslaved. India has the most, 8 million people. China is second. There's an estimated 29,000 enslaved people in the United States. I was dumbfounded when I read that. I said, that can't be true. We have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments outlawing slavery. Never mind. Who are they? Recent immigrants, particularly young female immigrants who are promised a job, they get the job, then they're taken home someplace wherever, near the sewing factory, locked in for the night, can't get out. Many farm workers are enslaved. They haul around in buses from bus to bus. They're watched. They can't get away. Some embassy workers who are from their native lands and never leave the embassy are enslaved, and sex workers. Nearly 3/4 worldwide of enslaved people are women or girls. 1/4 are children, and 2/3 of them are in Asia. More than half of all enslaved people today are in 4 countries: China, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Now, if you look at the right-hand panel, the main occupations that they're involved in, the worst industries are chocolate, cacao pickers are often children and enslaved, and fashion. Many of the places and the countries that sew up the fashions that are purchased in the Western world, many of those people are enslaved. Domestic workers, cacao workers, which I mentioned, forced brides in some countries, crop pickers, including the United States, sex workers, and fishers. So I'm telling you about the Underground Railroad because I know about it. Now you know about it. Maybe you knew about it before. What's keeping the Underground Railroad memory alive? It almost died. It started dying out when Harriet Tubman died in 1913. Then other people who were actually involved in the Underground Railroad, they all passed on. Then their descendants started passing on. Most of them are gone. And the stories died with them, taken to the grave. And by the 1960s, people had heard the Underground Railroad term. Most people hadn't. Many people who would hear the term actually thought it was a truly subterranean underground conveyance. A lawyer friend of mine in California thought that until I set her straight. And descendants and site owners were the ones putting the word out there, but there weren't enough of them. Then something happened. I'm not sure, quite why it happened, but school teachers on their own, beginning in the 1960s, picked up on the story of the Underground Railroad and started teaching it in their schools. One of these teachers was my cousin and Walt's sister, Maria Michael, who I think is in the audience tonight, who started doing this. And that caught on, and then whole school districts started incorporating the history of the Underground Railroad into their curricula, and that started giving it a big boost. In 1996, my friend Tony Cohen, who is a double descendant of Underground Railroad freedom seekers, decided to retrace the route that his 2 freedom seeker ancestors took. One route began in Savannah, Georgia, and the other route, I think, began in Virginia, and they both ended in Canada. And so one summer, 1996, Tony figured out what route they would have taken, strapped on his backpack, and started walking. He started walking with a National Geographic photographer. And the photographer would stay in motels. And Tony, if he could, would find an actual former safe house and stay there if he could, otherwise outdoors. And this article, which was written up in National Geographic, was one of the most popular ones they ever had and put Tony on the map. In 1998, the National Park Service created the first of 3 national United States government Underground Railroad programs. Theirs is called the Network of Freedom. It's gotten bigger by the years. It's always underfunded, needs more money. In 2004, we have the wonderful National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, which was opened in Cincinnati if you're ever going through, that neck of the woods anywhere close, by all means, take a swing through Cincinnati and go down and see the Freedom Center. It's right there on the Ohio River, looking across at Kentucky, where freedom seekers would come across and find their freedom in Ohio. Wonderful place. Authors, especially since 2005, Underground Railroad Free Press, which I published, got going in 2006. And in 2013, the movie, which many of you probably saw, 12 Years a Slave, came out and was a smash hit. It was named the best picture. But the main way to keep the memory of the Underground Railroad alive is by you hearing this story and then spreading it, taking the time to tell this fascinating story to your children, your grandchildren, your friends, your neighbors, and I would ask you to do that. Cost you nothing. It's an awful lot of fun to tell it. Want to have some fun? Go on the internet sometime soon. Google Internet Underground Railroad and take a trip. Let me recommend this book. This is the book I mentioned a while ago, The Underground Railroad and the War for the Soul of America by Fergus Borwick, buddy of mine. This is a wonderful book, very, very deeply researched. Fergus has been nominated by me and others for the the Pulitzer Prize in nonfiction. Almost won it one year. If you want to know the story, the Underground Railroad, this is the book to get first. Whoops. Went the wrong way. Well, now goes the right way. This is Underground Railroad Free Press, which I publish. If you'll take a look at this URL here, the internet address, you go there, you can subscribe. The subscriptions are free. It's published 6 times a year. The next issue is out July the 15th, and you get a free subscription, and so do any of your friends. Now, I'll have this address on the next page too, in case you are scrambling for pen and pencil. What we also do, we maintain the central registry of Underground Railroad organizations. There are about 160 of them at this point. We don't maintain the registry of sites. The US government does that. And we award the annual Free Press prizes, one each in advancement of knowledge, preservation, and leadership. They come out in September. So I'd like to thank you for being our audience tonight. Here's this URL again, if you would like it. I'll leave it up there. Thank you again, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Oh, Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Well, thank you. So I learned a whole lot this evening. I thought I probably knew much more than I knew. And the most riveting thing was hearing the story of a person who had made it to freedom in New York and then walked back to Virginia to free his sister and other people. I mean, most people these days won't walk a mile, but to think that, and when we talk about freedom in this country, I think we have to think about how hard freedom was to earn and to receive by so many people. And another thought I had while you were delivering this message was that almost every African-American person we see in this country, for the most part, is a descendant of people who fought to be free. And I mean, that's an amazing story when you think about it. We've become so used to what we are and how we, how we are composed. But that's the truth of it for the most part. I mean, most Black people are descended from slaves in this country. And certainly there have been a number of immigrants from various places since that time, but that is our legacy. And, we're not out of it. I have thought, what was the first year of slaves being brought to the New World?
1585.
So 1585, and if you think about the Emancipation Proclamation, which was 1865, 1866?
63.
63. Okay, so that's 300 years, right? 300 years.
Yeah.
And if you think about inertia and the way time works, and we're only about 150 years past the emancipation, correct?
That's right.
That means, I mean, if you believe in karmic return, et cetera, we're talking another 150 years.
Yeah.
And it's sad to think that, but current events make me think that people are slow on the uptake with this. And that's why I think it's important to have these lectures. And I encourage everyone to subscribe to the Underground Railroad Free Press. It's free, right?
It's free.
Yeah, it's free and it's online. And it will keep you up to date on these discoveries. I mean, it's fascinating that there are more and more, there's more and more information happening. I know when I was a young boy, I went to what is now your farm, which was our ancestral farm, started in 1768. And I remember my father saying to my brother, and I looked down into that field, boys, that's the spring house down there, sort of overgrown with vines at that time. So that's where runaway slaves hid. That was in our family, our oral history. We didn't talk much about it. I didn't know the term Underground Railroad at the time, and not much more was said. And that's probably a vestige of the fact that you didn't talk about it for fear of, being arrested or whatever. So there must be a million other stories out there that we haven't heard yet.
Oh, there are.
Yeah. I wanted to remind people that there are two more keynote lectures to happen this week, and they will be eventually on YouTube as well. Next week, next Monday, we have Andrew Reiner, who is lecturing about his book, Better Boys, Better Men. And it's about establishing a new masculinity that where we can begin to raise our boys in ways that are nonviolent. It's a fascinating book. He is a contributor to the New York Times. He's a professor at Towson. So I urge you to check in next Monday to listen to Andrew Reiner. And then on the following Monday, we have from the Church of the Good Shepherd in Sahuarita, Arizona, Randy Mayer, who's been with us a number of times. He's with the Green Valley Samaritans. And that's an underground railroad that we didn't mention, which is, from the border, south of the border into the United States. The Samaritans aid people in the desert who are at risk. The latest story he told me was encountering a 5-year-old with a backpack who had made his way across with some telephone numbers in his backpack. His parents are still south of the border. And the sense is that they would probably die because they were being pursued by the bad guys. So think of that. In our country, there are 5-year-olds making their way to some relative somewhere. but being alone, I couldn't even find the Good Humor Man when I was 5 years old. But couldn't walk out into the street of the suburbs and figure out where I was. And here we have 5-year-olds making their way. So this humanizes that. Tomorrow, if you're watching this live tomorrow, which is Tuesday, the 28th, Pete will be speaking in the Search for Common Ground class, which will be a great time for us to do Q&A and to find out more about his work. And that is open to everyone. You can look online for that URL. It's the Search for Common Ground class, and it's, of course, it's virtual. So I've really enjoyed this, Peter, and thank you for your support over the years, which has been totally consistent and wonderful. And I should also mention that Cooling Springs, your farm, your family farm, is on a national registry. Is that right? Could you speak to that? Tell us about that.
It's not on the National Register. Never applied for that. It's complicated and there are strings attached, but it is a registered Maryland historic site and also a county historic site.
And that is a site where the spring house is, and Cooling Springs, and where that railroad comes through and splits the land. And is it still possible to arrange for you to welcome groups there and give them an historic tour of the land?
Our insurance company made us stop conducting tours.
Oh my, oh,
Yes.
those insurance people.
Yeah.
Wow.
No tours. So that was the end of that.
Well, you do have a website that people can see the farm, correct?
That's right. Cooling Springs with an S.org.
.org, right. And for those of you who aren't from Maryland, or if you're from Maryland, haven't visited that part of Maryland, the Michael land makes its way down to the Potomac, and there's the towpath of is it the C? It's the C&O, right? Or is it the B&O?
I said B&O. It's C&O, Chesapeake and Ohio Canal.
Right, the C&O Canal. And right north of there is none other than Harper's Ferry, which is where John Brown did his thing.
That's right.
That's all. It's an amazing area, and it's a wonderful path on which you can ride your bicycles as well, and see that area. One of my fantasies has been I wish I could go back in time and be on our family farm and see what that was like, and also what the talk was about John Brown. Now, John Brown's thing happened in, what was it, 1858? Was it? It was
59.
59, right? So, that had to reverberate through that community. People had to know about that, and
Oh, they did.
the Union commander there at Harper's Ferry, which was an arsenal, was none other than Robert E. Lee, the Union commander.
He was a Union guy still. That's right.
Right. So we could go on and on, but thank you so much, Peter. And we'll see you tomorrow in class. And hopefully we'll keep seeing everyone here on the Common Ground YouTube channel. I'd like to remind people we have an in-person festival on July 16th on the campus of McDaniel College, which means if it's really hot, it's going to be air conditioned. And if it's raining, we're going to be inside. But if it's a beautiful day, we'll be all over that campus celebrating with music and art and dance and storytelling, etc. So as they say, you all come to the Common Ground on the Hill Roots Music and Arts Festival and the Deer Creek Fiddlers Convention on July 16th. Thank you, Peter, and hope you come by on the 16th.
We plan to. And thank you, Walt. And keep up your good work. Also, Maria and Phil.
Yes, you gave me these wonderful plaudits at the beginning of this, but Common Ground has always been this work done by many, many, many people who believe in this, who believe in the work. And, I can't say enough great things about the people in the office and our volunteers and McDaniel College for giving us this home. It's been a good ride, and we expect to stay on the bus for a while. So